Patriots fans and Colts fans, once again, we are crossing the streams here on Crossover Thanksgiving Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Mike Debate of Locked On Patriots, Jake Arthur, one half of the hosting tandem of Locked On Colts. And Jake, as the late, great Gorilla Monsoon would say if this were WrestleMania, the time for the talk is just about over, my friend. If the Colts are to come into New England and earn the victory, defeat the Patriots, remain in the playoff race, what would you say are Indy's keys to victory?
Yeah, so last week against, for my money, the best team in the league, the Lions, the Colts did an awesome job of beating themselves. Not to say that they could have beat the Lions, but they could have made it a lot more interesting than it wound up being. I'll tell you a scary story real quick in several parts. All right, so I mentioned the blocking was bad. You know, there was problems with discipline and everything. The offense last week only had 2 players with a pass blocking grade considered above average. Everyone else awful. Run blocking was worse. They only had 1 guy with really a passable grade in run blocking. This according to PFF. In terms of receiving, I mentioned, you know, they'd been dropping the ball. There was miscommunications and everything. They had 3 guys, Kylan Granson, Ashton Dulin, and Drew Ogletree, all with grades below 50. Essentially last week, if you weren't Michael Pittman Jr. or Josh Downs, you weren't contributing. It was ugly there. And then you mentioned the Patriots had 10 penalties last week. So did the Colts. 8 of them on offense. A lot of pre-snap stuff as well. Really uncharacteristic. Like Quentin Nelson, for example, not been having a good time. And then defensively, missed tackles were a big problem. They had 15 of them, which led to 175 yards after the catch for Detroit and 110 yards rushing after contact. So I say all that to say this: it cannot get much worse. If there's so much that they did to themselves last week, and it's very uncharacteristic. Maybe not the missed tackles, but like a lot of the penalties and everything. They wiped out about 96, 97 yards from gains because of penalties. So if you just clean any of that up, like you'll be fine. So I think defensively, if they go ahead and attack, I think the push that the Colts defensive line is going to be able to get will really help the linebackers, EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin, look like them old selves. They've been part of the problem when it comes to the middle of the Colts defense getting gashed. So I like the Colts defensive front to help the entire front 7 get back on track. And then offensively, I think the Colts are going to be a little more efficient. I am interested to see if A.D. Mitchell getting into the lineup in case Josh Downs can't go, if that helps make things more explosive. Again, I mentioned the Colts really, really want to get the run game going. They have 2 guys who can do it, Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson. So I'm going to have some faith that they get some things figured out and clean up some of the self-inflicted wounds. But, you know, O-line play, just play normally. Again, I think they're probably going to make a switch at right guard this week. Catch the ball and be where you're supposed to be in running your routes. And then just make tackles on defense. Like, this sounds like I'm a high school coach grilling these things into my players, but this is an NFL team having these fundamental problems right now. But you just clean up those things that every coach will tell you have to master, and I think you're going to be fine.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel the same way. It is a professional football team, but yet we constantly talk about the fundamentals not being performed well on the field and essentially not being executed. And it leads to bigger problems on the field for both teams. And you're going to hear me talk about that with the New England Patriots in just a moment, because that is one of my keys to victory for the Pats. Clean up the intangibles. But I think if New England is going to have any hope of being able to beat Indy this weekend and come in and play spoiler, I think on offense, they need to establish the run. And I think a lot of people will look at this team and say, well, with Drake May under center, you really need to air the ball out and the run needs to be more complementary. But when an Alex Van Pelt offense is working at its best, that running game, that outside zone running game is facilitating everything you're doing in the play action game. It's allowing Drake to take shots down the field. It's giving him the room to be able to go off script and make plays when things go awry. And it's also giving him the opportunity to use the intermediate areas of the field to hit for short yardage gains. If the Patriots are working on all cylinders, that running game is working. So that's going to be key one for the Pats. Establish the run early. Try to put Indy on its heels. If they can do that, they have a chance to keep this game close, and I think it'll be manageable. The second key for the Pats, and we talked a little bit about this in the previous segment, is trying to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I mentioned that the Patriots are most comfortable in man coverage schemes. And I expressed a little bit of concern as to whether or not the Patriots would even be able to defend that because they had so many problems against the Rams just a couple of weeks ago. I understand that Indy doesn't put as much motion into their offense as the Rams do, but they have an army of great blocking receivers. And for a play caller as gifted as Shane Steichen, who's someone who will adapt to what his opponent does not do well and try to use it against them. I worry about the New England Patriots' ability to play in that, to really essentially be able to play through that, because I think that's going to be very difficult for the Pats to adjust. They haven't shown an ability to do it yet. Coaching staff is going to have to be much more alert and aware of what their opponents are doing to give them a puncher's chance. And finally, Jake, again, I end with cleaning up the intangibles. New England Patriots are too futile on third down. They only converted 3 of 14 attempts last week. Again, I come back to the 10 penalties, lack of communication in the field, not a lot of continuity that you're seeing on this defense, and it's leading to big plays and gash plays against this club that's putting them in holes early. If the Pats are even thinking about trying to pull the upset, all those intangibles have to be much better. If they're average or below average on any of those, Indy walks away with the win, and I don't have a doubt about that.
I like it. The Colts really need to win. I mean, they're in the playoff hunt right now only because the rest of the AFC is a logjam, and there's only a few teams that really seem to want to be in the playoffs, it seems. So that's why they're still alive. Like every time the Colts lose, it feels like the Texans do as well. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the games where you cannot afford to lose. Like they have 5 more games remaining, and there's only one of them that's against a team that probably should beat them, and that's the Broncos. The rest of these, the Colts are facing cellar-dwelling teams, so they cannot afford to lose a game like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see if that carries over into Sunday. Will the New England Patriots take throwback weekend here in Foxborough and make it a good time for the New England Patriots fans that will be up to see this team play on Thanksgiving weekend on Sunday? Or will the Indianapolis Colts come in, hold court, and remain very much alive in their pursuit of a playoff spot for the 2024 season?